In April 1993, I found myself amidst a group of soldiers at a remote quarry near Saddle Mountain, right by the Lewis and Clark River. We were there for some serious demolition training using C4 plastic explosives and ammonium nitrate. Just another day at work, or so I thought. While we were getting ready, something caught my eye. Three massive creatures on two legs appeared in the distance, covered head to toe in black or dark brown hair. These weren't just big, they were gigantic, probably around 7 or 8 feet tall. The one in the middle stood as still as a statue, while the two on either side, a bit shorter, swayed left to right, shifting their weight from foot to foot. They didn't seem aggressive, just curious, watching us intently as we maneuvered our convoy down a nearby logging road. We stood there, just as captivated, observing them for about half an hour. Eventually, they moved away from the quarry with an elegance that was almost hypnotic, gliding across the terrain in a few long strides, their arms swinging in an exaggerated but fluid manner. 6 months later, the memory of that day lingered, leading us back to the site with the Bigfoot research project. This time we found tracks, big and small, and even managed to collect some possible fecal samples for scientific analysis. Unfortunately, we never saw the creatures again, but during our subsequent training sessions, we occasionally heard eerie howls and what seemed like faint attempts at communication echoing through the forest. To say the encounter was interesting is an understatement. It left a lasting impression on all of us. Even today, I can vividly recall the towering figures and the mysterious sounds of those creatures. It was a haunting yet fascinating brush with the unknown that I'll never forget. It was the summer of '95 near the town of Malala. I was 16 years old and volunteering as a camp counselor. My friend and I decided to clear some brush from the trails inside the camp, so we grabbed our lunches and headed out. We were about half a mile from the main camp, really close to the Malala River. I found a spot about 60 feet from a swampy area called Money Creek to sit down and eat. My friend suddenly remembered he had left something back at camp. Can't remember what it was, though, so he went back to get it. I figured it would take him about 10 minutes. About 7 minutes after he left, I heard something in the woods to my left. I jumped up, trying to see what it was, and there it was, a massive, hairy, man-like creature standing next to a large tree, around 50 feet away. This thing was towering, maybe 8 feet tall, way taller than me, and incredibly wide and bulky. It had thick, long fur that was a medium brown color, about 6 inches long. For a few seconds, we just stared at each other, making direct eye contact. It had dark eyes and a look of shock on its face, like it was deciding what to do next. Then, it stepped to my left, behind a large tree, and took off running. I couldn't see it the whole way because the trees blocked my view, but I could definitely hear it. The footsteps were heavy and loud, snapping branches as it ran, making a ton of noise. I stood there, stunned, listening to it fade away for about 10 seconds, trying to process what just happened. Completely freaked out, I ran back down the trail towards the camp. I met up with my friend on his way back and told him the whole story, wide-eyed and breathing heavily. It was something I never expected and something I'll never forget. In the fall of 2011, near Sumter, Oregon, I had a pretty unforgettable experience. Me and a group of buddies had spent the summer and fall on the side of a mountain, several thousand feet up, reopening some old gold mines that had been shut down back during World War II. Cell phone reception was practically non-existent where we were, which made communication nearly impossible. One evening, as the sun was setting, one of my friends, Steve, asked me to give him a ride up to the top of a switchback so he could try and make a phone call. It was a pretty short distance, so I took him up there on the ATV, and then I walked about 100 yards away to give him some privacy. It was getting darker and darker, and I realized that we should probably get back to camp before it got pitch black. So I started walking back towards Steve to hurry him up. As I got closer to a group of trees near the switchback, I suddenly heard the deepest, most menacing growl I'd ever heard. My first thought was that it must be a big cat, but the noise was so much deeper than any cat could make. I regretted not bringing my rifle or shotgun with me, thinking it was just going to be a quick trip. All I had on me was my 1911 sidearm, which I quickly drew. My heart was pounding and I was really worried about Steve, knowing that whatever was growling was between me and him. I cautiously walked towards Steve, scanning the area with my handgun, trying to locate whatever was making that sound. The shadows and tree clusters made it tough to see anything. As I was sidewalking past the trees, I glanced over my right shoulder to check if Steve had noticed anything. He sure had. He was standing there with his pistol drawn in one hand and his phone in the other. Just as I turned back towards the growling sound in the trees, I was shocked to see an absolutely massive, tall creature moving towards the tree line. It was huge, and it actually had to slide past me to get to the cluster of trees. It didn't seem like it was trying to threaten me, it just wanted to get away. Once it reached the trees, everything went silent. The whole situation was so surreal. If it had been a big cat, there would have been a lot more noise in the trees, but this creature moved with an eerie silence. I couldn't believe how quickly and gracefully it moved, given its size. I remember thinking how easily it could run down a deer. From Steve's angle, he couldn't see the creature, but we both met at the ATV at the same time, wide-eyed and ready to get out of there. After replaying the ordeal in my head 100 times, I started thinking that maybe it was a female or a juvenile Bigfoot that we had surprised, and it had growled to warn us off. We stayed on that mountain for the next 2 weeks, but I didn't get much sleep after that encounter. It was an experience that would stick with me forever. It was the winter of 1978, and I found myself braving a nasty, stormy day at Fort Stevens State Park, near the North Jetty Beach area. My loyal dog was my only company as we made our way up to the observation tower, hoping to catch a glimpse of the powerful waves crashing against the rocks and shore, just like we had done many times before. As I stood there, mesmerized by the raw power of nature, something caught my eye at the edge of the water. It was a figure, but it didn't look like a normal human. The figure was waving its arms up and down, facing both the surf and our tower. Another person was in the tower with his daughter, and they were as entranced by the sight as I was. We exchanged bewildered glances that seemed to scream, "What the hell is that?" but said nothing, continuing to watch the figure in stunned silence. Moments later, a pickup truck with its lights on appeared, driving up the beach from the south. That's when the scale of the figure really hit us. It had to be at least 8 feet tall, maybe more. The figure, or creature as I now think of it, noticed the truck and swiftly moved away from the beach before the vehicle could get close. It didn't run, but took incredibly long strides, covering the 30 or so yards to the dune's edge in just a few steps before disappearing. I was filled with a mix of excitement, fear, and sheer wonderment at what I had just witnessed. With my heart racing, I grabbed my dog and decided to head to the nearest parking lot, right next to where the creature had descended from the dunes, hoping for another glimpse. As I cautiously approached the beach, the fear began to overwhelm me. The wind was howling, and the roar of the surf filled my ears. My dog, usually calm, was acting anxious and seemed eager to leave. When I reached the spot where the creature had come down from the sand hill, I couldn't find any footprints, but the sand was clearly disturbed. The hill was a good 10 feet high, and the thought of such a massive creature scaling it so effortlessly intensified my fear. I couldn't handle it any longer, and made a beeline back to my car, fear spurring me on. I've never seen the creature again, but the image of it waving its arms at the stormy surf has remained burned in my mind, even 30 years later.